One of the big events of this week, besides the Queen passing, was actually what's going on with currencies, with the U.S. dollar setting record after record. At the same time, the euro is really falling off, and boy, look at the yen. What is going on with the economies?
Look, the United States has a huge advantage. We've recognized it for a long time in terms of our lack of dependence on egregiously expensive foreign energy. And that is benefiting the relative strength of our economy. At the same time, we've mounted a stronger response macroeconomically to the pandemic. Our central bank is moving faster to do necessary tightening with respect to monetary policy, given inflation, and all those various factors are making us a safe haven, a mecca for capital, and that's causing resources to flow into the dollar. It's remarkable that people were saying that the dollar's day was past not very long ago, given its current strength. And my guess is that there's room for this to continue. You know, the euro was in the low 80s against the dollar 20-some years ago, and in some ways, the relative fundamentals of the United States compared to Europe are even stronger now than they were then.
So, Larry, there's talk actually about the possibility of intervention in Japan to try to support the yen. Given what you just said, that it's larger macroeconomic factors, is it possible for Japan actually to intervene and actually shore up the yen?
I tend to be skeptical that intervention can have sustained impacts. The capital markets are just so big, even relative to the resources that the authorities have, that I would be surprised in today's world if interventions could have large, sustained impacts on maintaining the value of the yen. I think the more fundamental questions for the yen involve the level of Japanese interest rates, both in the short and over the longer term, and the extent to which the Japanese will at some point feel comfortable raising those interest rates, which is not a simple proposition given the magnitude of debts in Japan.
So we're seeing a different sort of intervention over in Europe, both with respect to the United Kingdom, where the new Prime Minister Liz Truss now is trying to impose a cap on the cost to households. We also have the possibility of a price cap being agreed upon in Europe. Is that a reasonable intervention? Is it likely to be effective at dealing with the runaway energy costs, particularly in Europe?
Look, it's an extraordinarily difficult situation, and it's a mistake to be too judgmental from too far away. But when I saw the emerging plan, it reminded me of standard Latin American populist approaches. Fix the price and commit to unlimited subsidy. And those policies often have not worked out well at all for those who implemented them. And so it seems a very dangerous course. Now, I think we ought to give the British authorities an opportunity to explain the rationale for their policy, to explain the financing mechanisms behind their policies. But a policy of tax cutting, avoiding taxation of windfall profits, subsidizing consumers for low-priced energy in the face of a nearly unlimited potential liability seems to me to at least raise very serious and severe arithmetic questions. And I think people who are thinking about the pound are thinking about that.
Larry, perhaps the story that overshadowed the entire week, not necessarily in economics or finance, but overall, was the passing of Queen Elizabeth II at the age of 96. And I wonder if that gives us an occasion to reflect on what has happened to the British economy since 1952, when she became queen, and to the present time. It's been through an awful lot. It's grown a fair amount at the same time. And what we think is likely in store for King Charles III.
You know, in today's world, there are very few leaders who command nearly universal respect. And there are very few leaders who are able, through decades in the public eye, to maintain that dignity and to maintain respect. And Queen Elizabeth did that, and did it as recently as this year at the age of 96. And it's a quite extraordinary thing that I think history will long remember. She stood for taking the long view. She stood for rising above passions of the moment. And I think those are useful lessons for all of us involved in political economy. Useful lessons when the urge to point scoring or cheap partisan advantage looms large in politics, and useful lessons with respect to economics and economic policy as well. And one has to take a longer view. And so Queen Elizabeth was always acting not with a view to the newspaper headlines, but with a view to the history books. And my counsel to those who will lead Britain politically at this very difficult moment is to do the same thing. And I think that's something we can all usefully keep in mind in every country.
So, Larry, let's convene the Larry Summers Book Club here. What are you reading these days? I understand you have a book you like a lot.
Brad DeLong, my former student, now a colleague at the Treasury Department, now a professor at Berkeley, has written the one economic history book that I think everybody should take a very serious look at. Slouching Towards Utopia is the title, and it chronicles the world from the moment growth really took off in 1870, pretty much up to the present. And the only thing we really can learn from for thinking about the future economy is history. And Brad tells it in a dramatic and strongly thematic way.
And finally, Larry, you were part of history this week in the unveiling of the portrait of former President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. You were there. Describe for us what it was like. What were your reflections on that revisit of yours to the White House?
It was joyous to see the former president again and to see so many of the colleagues I worked with in the administration.
Thanks for letting us invite a few friends to the White House. We will try not to tear up the place.
At a difficult moment, hearing somebody talk about hope and change and remember the moments of hope and change was inspiring. President Obama spoke of how he always thought of the presidency as a relay race. It was his task for 8 years to carry the baton. And I think that's a useful idea for us all to keep in mind. It goes back to what we said about Queen Elizabeth. Let's think about what future history books are going to say rather than what 2 hours from now's tweets are going to say. If we can all do that, I think we'll all be better off.